Welcome to the Ingletopia podcast, where we explore British history, travel, and culture. And I'm your host, Jonathan Thomas. A quick word about today's sponsor before we begin. This episode is brought to you by ACP Rail and BritRail. If you're planning a trip to Britain and you want the freedom to explore the country the way locals do by train, a BritRail pass is one of the best tools in your travel kit. It was created to do one thing above all, to get visitors out of London and into the rest of Britain and make the whole rail system simple for international visitors. It gives you unlimited travel across the Network Rail network in England, Scotland, and Wales, with the freedom to hop on and off at Edinburgh, York, Bath, Cardiff, and the Cotswolds and the Highlands, and just about everywhere in between. No fiddly pre booking, no fixed tickets, just turn up and go. We'll be talking all about how it works in this very episode, and you can learn more and buy your pass at acprail.com, and we will put a link in the show notes. And here's something very exciting and related to this episode. To celebrate this episode, we've teamed up with ACP Rail and BritRail to give away a first-class BritRail 4-day Flexi Pass. 4 flexible days of premium travel across England, Scotland, and Wales delivered straight to your phone. To enter, just head to angletopia.net/BritRail. The link will be in the show notes. And now on to today's subjects. For a lot of American visitors, the British Railway network is one of the most wonderful things about traveling in Britain, and also one of the most confusing sometimes. The tickets, the classes, the pass options, the abbreviations, the difference between a turn up and go fare and advance ticket, what flexi means, which trains your pass covers. It can be overwhelming before you even have left home. But once you understand it, the train unlocks Britain in a way that nothing else can. My guest today is exactly the person to demystify all of it. Tim Roebuck has spent his entire career in rail travel. He started out as a station manager in the UK and went on to work for Rail Europe and British Travel International, and then spent 25 years as VP of sales at ACP Rail. He retired last year, but still advises the company, and he's a genuine expert on rail itineraries and the kind of person who knows the hidden gems most visitors never find. There is very little about British trains, how the network fits together, how to buy the right ticket, how to get the most out of a rail pass that Tim hasn't seen firsthand. He's here to give us a real British Rail 101. Tim, welcome to the Angletopia podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. Looking forward to it.
I've been really excited about this one because longtime Angletopia listeners will know that I love trains. So, Tim, before we get to the practical side, I'd love our listeners to know who they're hearing from. You've had a remarkable journey in the rail industry. You started as a station manager, then worked for Rail Europe and British Travel International, and then you spent the latter part of your career at ACP Rail. So, can you walk us through your career and how did you end up spending a lifetime on trains?
Yeah, sure. I went to a good old fashioned English grammar school in Lincolnshire in the eastern part of England, where they insisted on teaching me things like Latin. And that was despite the fact I'd told them I was really only interested in cricket, football, trains, and planes. Cut a long story short, I ended up getting on the British Rail Management Training Scheme, where for a few years you learn about all aspects of running a railway, of trains, and particularly the safety critical issues, and you pass rules and regulations. And then the first job, as you say, I ended up as a traffic manager, a station manager, where you're responsible for an area. And within that area, you're looking after not just the station, the booking office, the ticket office, the security there, but particularly the signaling systems, the signalers, making sure that's okay, and responding to incidents, mishaps, accidents, emergencies, middle of the night call outs, all of that sort of thing. I did that for several years. Could have been as something as mundane as sheep driver seeing a sheep near the line and things like that, or somebody fell over on the steps or whatever it was. That's what the reality of running a railway is like. And it was great. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Great people to work with. You learn you learn a lot when you're working with people at 3 a.m. It's fun. But I became interested in travel and tourism, and I was lucky enough to get into a subsidiary of what a British Rail called British Rail International. And I found myself in Dublin, in Ireland. Ireland, small-ish country, but a huge market for Britain, for travellers travelling to Britain, travelling around Britain. So I was the manager for Ireland there, lived there. Then I moved to France, looked after all of British Rail's offices on the continent. for a few years. And then I found myself being asked to come and work for and lead a company called BritRail, subsidiary of British Rail called BritRail Travel International in New York. And I had the great title of President USA at the time. I had the card to prove it.
Love
And
it.
and I did that for many years. We had offices and the sales staff scattered around the countryside, and we worked with travel agents, tour operators, airlines, online travel agencies, all of that sort of thing. Eventually, we were at the time of privatization, everything was sold, and my bit of British Rail was sold, and I ended up working for the SNCF subsidiary, Rail Europe, which was great. And after a few years, I worked with some of my former colleagues and friends at ACP Rail, where I spent the latter part of my career. And we worked very much and managed the BritRail Pass. And I'm pleased to say that despite the fact we were working with as many as 26 different train operating companies, we managed to convince them that the BritRail Pass was still a great product, and it's here to this day. So that's my story. And as I always say to people, I feel as though I've never really had to work a day in my life because I've thoroughly enjoyed it all. Been very lucky.
Well, that's wonderful. And that's the way I like to look at things. It's not work if you love what you're doing.
Really.
S- So, having seen it from inside a UK train station and then from the industry, how has British rail travel changed over the course of your career, especially from the perspective of an international visitor trying to get around?
Yeah. In a way, lots has changed, but in other ways, nothing has changed. Let me explain. The organization, and I think we'll probably touch on it later, of how trains are organized in Britain has changed and is changing as we speak. It is changing again from British Rail. It went to private companies with lots of different colors, different logos, and all of that sort of thing. And now there's a move back again. At the same time, the network is very similar. There's actually a few more trains. Frequency is greater, and the BritRail Pass hasn't changed. You can't get on a wrong train. The BritRail Pass covers all of the mainline rail services, and that hasn't changed. That has remained in these times a solid bit of consistency that we all crave for, and it's still there, just as it was.
So, you're known as an expert on rail itineraries and you really know how to put a trip together. So, what is it about train travel in Britain specifically that you think makes it so special and so well suited to the kind of trip an American visitor wants to make?
Well, I often think and say that Britain, the railways were invented in Britain in the 1820s, the 1830s. The first train service was operated in the north of England. Thereafter, the network grew, and towns were built around railways. So everywhere you're likely to want to go is you get there very quickly and you're arriving where you were, where you want to be. Last week, I was reminded once again, one of my favorite places, I have friends in York, and it's a great place. When they built the railway, where did they build it? Right outside the city walls. When you arrive on the train, you walk out the entrance, and there in front of you, 30 yards away, are the Roman walls. You're there. Uh, they didn't build it to drive cars around. You just walk to the town and the shambles and everything else. And that's the same whether it's Exeter or Manchester or Newcastle. You arrive where you want to go.
All right, so let's start with the big picture for someone who has never set foot on a British train. How is the network actually structured? We hear about national rail, lots of different train operating companies, the underground. How does it all fit together? And how much of it does a visitor really need to understand?
Yeah, well, until the 90s, 25, 30 years ago, it was a unified network under the name of British Rail. At that time, it was privatized, and every aspect was put out for tender to operators. And in a nutshell, you ended up with a company called Railtrack, which is now Network Rail, which was company was responsible for the infrastructure, the tracks, the stations. And then you had as many as 26 different companies operating different routes and services. And you can imagine that has consolidated over the years because it was, oh, unsurprisingly, became very complicated and thus very expensive. There is a move currently to consolidation, and that is the government strategy. And, what goes around comes around. I started with British Rail. By next year, the organization is going to be called Great British Railways, and it'll be a unified network. And the great advantage of that, the great problem with the organization that has been, is that long term planning in railways is so difficult. And you've got to look so far ahead, and that just hasn't worked with planning new tracks or replacement tracks, new rolling stock, new trains, all of that sort of thing really needs long-term planning. And that's one of the principal reasons it's coming back. Now, as far as the customer is concerned, yes, for the last few decades, they've travelled on London North Eastern Railway or Great Western or Merseyrail, whatever it might be. The joy for an overseas visitor is that if you buy a BritRail pass, doesn't matter. We managed to arrange and negotiate with all of them to participate, and the BritRail pass is valid on all of the national rail network. National Rail is the infrastructure operator, and most people come across that. They operate a good website called nationalrail.com, and that is where you can check train times and get real time updates on the services, maybe if there's engineering works and all of that sort of thing. So that is how the railway is operated. And by next year, you'll see a lot fewer different colour trains and logos, and you'll see a lot more of GBR, Great British Railways.
Yeah, so all those train operating companies are now going to be one.
Yeah, at this point in time, already over half of the network is actually operated by the state Department of Transport once again, even though they're still operating under their former names.
So one thing that can confuse a lot of Americans is that, again, as there isn't a single national train company like Amtrak, and there will soon be one, but there are many different operators. And so, how does that affect how a visitor plans a journey or buys a ticket? Is it seamless, or is it more complicated? Or, and keeping in mind this could be changing in the next year or so.
Yeah, there's always been great efforts to try and maintain the simplicity or asimplicity of tickets, particularly for point-to-point tickets, and it's not always been successful. But the prices are supposed, wherever you buy them, the prices are supposed to be similar. A BritRail pass it has been kind of above all of that and has remained simple, and has one price which is sold, and you can go to the ACP rail website or call them or whatever, and you can buy a BritRail pass in your local currency, and you can travel on any of the national mainline rail networks. We can talk about what it's not valid on, but uh, that really comes down to things like the tube and a few of the local railways. So it is for the overseas visitor. It was and still is pretty simple, and that's great, and that's what we've tried to do because it is complicated enough for a visitor to travel around without putting our organizational hurdles in the way.
And so something that can catch a lot of first-time visitors off guard is that London doesn't have one central railway station. There are several big terminals. There's King's Cross, there's Paddington, Euston, Victoria, Waterloo, and more. And the one you leave from depends on where in the country you're going to. So can you kind of help our listeners understand the London station hubs and know how which ones they're going to need?
Yeah, um, there are several stations in London, and that dates from the building of the railways back in a century and a bit ago, when when the railways were first built and how they ended up going into London. And by the way, I would say before we even talk about that, some of the greatest structures in London are the railway stations. If you
Yeah,
go
I would
to St
agree.
Pancras, particularly, go outside, have a look at it. It is absolutely a magnificent building, and it is the hub of that local area. And that's so often the case with the railway stations. So yes, the principal ones are King's Cross, and that is the services up through Peterborough, Doncaster, York to Leeds to Newcastle to Edinburgh and up to Aberdeen. currently it's London North Eastern. We call that the East Coast Main Line. King's Cross is across the road from St Pancras International, as it is now known, and that is the Midland Main Line. But it is also the terminal for Eurostar nowadays, and it is, as I say, 1 minute walk from King's Cross. Further along Euston Road is Euston Station. That is the terminus for the trains to the Midlands, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, and up the West Coast Main Line to Glasgow. Going round, there's a local line, more of a local line out of Marylebone, goes to places like Stratford upon Avon, and a secondary, slightly slower route, but very pretty, to Birmingham. The Great Western, one of the historic old railway companies, and the train companies still called Great Western Railways, go out of Paddington, and that's to Cornwall, Devon, places like South Wales, Cardiff, and Swansea, and even as far as Fishguard, where you can get the train to the boat to Ireland. And Paddington is also the terminal for the Heathrow Express. Then for serving the south coast and the very busy commuter lines, Waterloo and Victoria. Victoria goes to Gatwick and to Brighton, and there's a very complicated array of tracks in both of those. And finally, Liverpool Street is the terminal for services to East Anglia. Norwich is the big place, but you can go also to Cambridge as well. So that is the array of stations. And when you look on either the ACP rail website, or you're looking for real time on National Rail, you'll see which station you go from. And they're all connected by the tube, by underground. They're not that far away. And as I say, some are very close, but most require a tube journey or a taxi ride or something like that.
And then there's the Elizabeth line, which is relatively new and has transformed how people move across London. So what is it, and why is it such a useful thing for visitors to know about, especially when going between these main line stations?
Right. The Elizabeth line opened 2 or 3 years ago, and was had been being built for a long time, because it was a very complicated bit of railway connecting east to west and going under London, working around the tube and all the rest of it. And it goes, at one point, it does go every few minutes from the Heathrow terminals right through central London, through Paddington, to places like Farringdon, out to East London. And it is considered part of the National Rail network, because it is heavy rail, and your BritRail pass is valid on it. And there are multiple places to change to get onto the tube network, or to walk to wherever you're going, whichever hotel or museum or whatever it is. The Heathrow Express still operates independent of that and goes to Paddington. That is the premium service. It costs a little bit more. It takes 15 minutes and it goes every 15 minutes. The Elizabeth line has far exceeded the expectations and has done really well. And so, but the advantage is, if you're, say, flying from the US and you're arriving in the morning, you're on the train first before all the commuters get on at a few of the intermediate stops. So it is a great service. One other thing, it is an unusual line in that it is right across the city. There's only a few places that do that really well. Paris has got quite a few, and that is a great one. There is another one which intersects with the Elizabeth line, called Thameslink, and Thameslink goes from the south coast, Brighton, to Gatwick and a few other places, as far as Cambridge, Peterborough, and many other places north of London. And so you can change at Farringdon and get straight to Brighton with one change from Heathrow, for example. So it has really opened up new opportunities, and all included in the BritRail pass.
And so let's talk about the wider network and how extensive it is. So you can genuinely get to most interesting places in Britain by train: the big cities, the countryside, the coast, the highlands. So you really don't need a car to see these places. So, what are some of your favorites that you like to suggest?
Well, I come from the eastern part of England, and whilst it's not a rural line by any manner of means, the East Coast main line. When I was little, I could open the window of the bedroom and I could hear the trains going up the bank between Peterborough and Grantham, the high speed trains, or the Deltics as we called them then. So I that's one of and the reason why I like it is because it just links so many interesting places and the scenery on their way. So you go from King's Cross, within a couple of hours, you're in York. Wonderful places we've just talked about. Going further north, Durham, uh, which has a great cathedral, Minster, lovely town set on a river, and you've just gone through Darlington, which is the birthplace of the railways. Once you get to Newcastle and beyond, you begin to travel along the North Sea coast through the beautiful town. Great place to stop off and stay and explore with a magnificent bridge, Berwick upon Tweed. And then north of that, you hug the coast, come in a little bit, go back again. It's a spectacular view all the way to Edinburgh. And if you can, carry on, go to Aberdeen, go through places like Stonehaven, um, hop off there before you arrive in Aberdeen. So that's one of my favourites. Another, which is much less travelled, um, requires a little effort, goes from Leeds to Carlisle. It's called the Settle and Carlisle through the Yorkshire Dales. Beautiful route, a real community route. Lots of the local communities offer walks and guided things and all of that sort of thing. So that's a great one to explore. I like the Cornish branch lines. Once you get down to Devon and Cornwall, there are some lovely uh, short branch lines. The journeys are probably only 20 to 45 minutes or something like that. The Loo branch at Looe, I went on not too long ago and thought that was great. To St Ives, another lovely town, lovely views as you take the train. I like that. Um, and an area of Britain which is really overlooked is East Anglia. Yes, people go to Cambridge, but what about Ely? 15 minutes north. It has a magnificent minster, beautiful town, connections to Oliver Cromwell, canal boats. It's spectacularly beautiful. Out of Norwich, there is an array of branch lines, and my favourite is to Sheringham and Cromer on the North Norfolk coastline. Very well known for walks, for birding, uh, for markets and market towns and things like that. So there are a few, and I should not continue without talking about some of the scenic lines in Scotland. And there are several. Every line in Scotland is scenic. You
Yeah.
can't go wrong. Um, there is one I like. It's a long journey north of Inverness. We call it the Far North Line, and it goes to Wick and Thurso. And the latter you can change and stay and get on a boat to go to the Shetland Line. So you really get the feel that you are at the end of the country, and you've gone across moors and through several stations where you can't get there by road. There is only a railway, and you're out in the beautiful wilds. And yes, you can get weather of all sorts, but whatever, it is spectacular and has got a real character to it. So there are just a few of the ones I like.
I've got a whole itinerary now of railway lines I have to do. So let's move on to talking about tickets, train tickets, and this will kind of evolve into the conversation about BritRail and how it makes all this unnecessary. But British train tickets can be famously confusing even to the British. So can you walk us through the basics? What are the main types of tickets a visitor will encounter? What does advance, off peak, anytime actually
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, we have managed to, I am afraid, end up with a pretty complicated, some would say market-driven pricing network, but it has come in for a lot of criticism. And under the new strategy of Great British Railways, one of their top goals is simplification of the ticketing system. Um, it is a little complicated because the definitions of peak and off peak and all the rest of it are very different depending upon the route and the area and things like that. But essentially, advance means, and that is the least expensive type of ticket. It is you're booking in advance, at least a day or more, and the numbers are limited. So, but you have to travel on that train. You can't change. It's just the same as with airlines over here. So that is the least expensive but the most restrictive option. Then there are peak and off peak, and the peak is generally considered around 9:30, not after 9:30 Monday to Friday, but it varies a little bit, and there are some exceptions to that, and certain trains. Open tickets are uh, the most expensive, and you can just walk up and buy one. And sometimes they can be very expensive, and that is why, and particularly when the BritRail Pass really wins hands down for that sort of thing. So I always I like to be able to just get up and go. I don't like planning too far ahead. Um, Maybe it's raining. Maybe you don't want to stay on the coast. You want to go, or you enjoyed the museum that you were enjoying in Cardiff in South Wales and the castle, and you want to stay another hour. You can do that with a BritRail pass. That is the big thing. So there are options, various options, but the BritRail pass has the key asset of simplicity and flexibility.
And so, what is the difference between first class and standard class on British trains? And is it worth paying extra for first class? So, like, what makes the difference in the journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you are traveling in and around, say, South London on the commuter trains, not all have first class. Many have first class, but it doesn't have the bells and whistles that a first class seat does on the longer haul. So if you're going up the East Coast Main Line, the West Coast Main Line, down to Devon, Cornwall, South Wales, first class means you are on a coach which will have fewer seats. It's 2 and 1 across as opposed to 2 and 2, with a bit extra foot width as well. A little bit more space to store your baggage, just fewer people. Um, and on all of those services, but during the day, during the week, you will get teas, coffees. Often, at certain meal times of the day, you'll get a meal on board. So for longer journeys, if you can trade up with your BritRail pass to get a first class ticket, and you're doing a few longer journeys, well worth it. If you're just pottering around London and the southeast, or around some of the using Manchester as a base, and you're going along the North Wales coast or something like that, probably not quite as much necessary, but certainly on the longer journeys to and from Scotland is the classic. If you can, it's great.
So, what are some common things that trip Americans up? Is it the peak versus off peak restrictions? Is it validating tickets? Is it barriers, carrying ID? What are some gotchas that you wish every visitor knew before they arrived?
Yeah, I was always surprised over the years. We had very little problems and and negative feedback, and I think that's because people, staff, are willing to help. And one of the other things I would say about traveling on the train in Britain, hey, you get to talk to and meet other people, local people. That doesn't happen when you're in a car. So problems tend to be resolved. I don't recall very many of those sort of problems. I think one of the bigger bits of advice where the feedback was sometimes, I wish I'd known, is to do with baggage, and not taking too much if you can, because that it can become a little bit of a problem, or a little bit of hard work if you can. So if you can travel a little lighter, or you use a base, or you use one of the newer online luggage storage things, that is a good way to do. Most of the stations, the biggest stations, do have left luggage. So that is one of the main bits of feedback which um, we did get, and the solution is if you can travel a little lighter or leave bags when you're really doing a tour, you'll enjoy it even more.
Yeah, that's one thing we're big advocates of is traveling as light as you can. I'm a big advocate of the carry-on only rule. Don't travel something bigger than a carry-on because it's easy to get around. It's cobblestones and if you have to lift
Right,
it, you don't want to lift 100-pound suitcase over stones getting to your hotel and then getting it into the overhead, you know,
right.
in the train. It's don't make it too hard on yourself.
And as long as you remember the essentials, like your glasses, your medications. Hey, if you need a shirt, you can buy one. It's
Exactly. I mean, you get the fun of going into a British store and
right.
and trying to find what you're looking for, which is an adventure in itself.
Yeah.
So that I think that brings us to the BritRail Pass, which is what we're here to talk about. So I know we've kind of touched on it already, but what is the BritRail Pass and what does it let you do?
Yes, the BritRail Pass is a product which you buy a certain number of days, and that can be consecutive days. And you have to use, say, you buy 4 days consecutive travel within a month, or and it costs just a little bit more on a per day basis. A Flexi, which means you buy, for example, 4 days in a month, or 8 days, or 15, or whatever it is, and you can have days in between. So it a little bit depends upon the type of journey that you're doing. And the BritRail Pass at its core is a real alternative to renting a car. That is where the competition is. Um, and Britain is a small country, but it has pretty crowded roads and busy roads, and of course drive on the other side of the road as well. So the BritRail Pass is very much intended as an alternative to renting a car for the duration of your stay. Um, and the BritRail Pass, as I say, is valid on every mainline train, not the tube, and you cannot get on a wrong train. There are no restrictions at all. Um, you can reserve a seat if you want. I think we'll probably touch on that later, but you don't have to. So it is a very, very simple, straightforward proposition.
So it basically simplifies the whole confusing ticketing system. You pay one price and you can use it anywhere.
That's right. You could, for the day that you've got your ticket validated, you could stay on the train the whole time. And that is, let's just touch on that. The joy of traveling on a train and the joy of the journey is part of the trip. If you're going along the North Wales coast on your way to Bangor or Llandudno, or even to Holyhead to get the ferry, the joy of the journey is really part of it. And there is so much like that across the Britain as well. So that's important to note.
Well, and I think one thing we should emphasize is the freedom. I mean, you can get on a train in London and go all the way to the tippy top of Scotland and Thurso, get on the train, go back to London, or you could get up the next day and go down a different line and go all the way to Cornwall if you wanted to, and you can literally go anywhere.
That that's right. You can, at the last minute, you can change your mind. You can do a tour. You can go back to where you went. You could do a day trip from London to York, and you're just using one day of your pass. You could go further. You could go to Edinburgh and back is feasible because, as I said before, the journey is just part of the joy of the travel. All of those things are possible. You go up to Edinburgh, go across to Glasgow, come down the west coast. Uh, those sort of things are feasible, and it's not hard work because you're sitting on a train looking at the countryside go by, or the towns and the cities.
Well, that sounds nice.
Yes.
So, an important point that a lot of people don't realize is actually the BritRail pass is only for international visitors. British people cannot buy this pass. So, can you explain why that is and what visitors need to know about that rule?
Yeah, that's true because it's a good offer, and it is a marketing way of differentiating between business travel, which would pays more, especially for first class, and if it was sold domestically, it would abstract from the core business class revenue. That is a principal reason, and it is a good offer. We also know that visitors do not travel as much at peak times, so it tends to fill emptier seats. Um, if you've got a BritRail pass and you're visiting, you're unlikely to be on the 6:30 a.m. train out of Leeds going to London, which is what business people are doing. You're much more likely to be on the 9:30, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock out of London when the trains are quieter. So from the railway operator's point of view, it's a win. It's a win-win, filling empty seats and people having a good time as well. So that's the two sides of the equation there, and that's the reason why it is a good deal. And yes, you have to be an overseas resident for more than 6 months, I think it is, in order to be able to purchase a BritRail pass. And you're supposed to carry your passport or some identification of your residency when
Well,
you
that's
have
good to
it.
know. Should always have your passport on you when you're traveling, but make
Yes,
make
yes.
make sure you have it easily reachable when you're on the
Yeah,
train in case you have
yeah.
to show it. So there are two main structures to the pass. There's the consecutive pass and the flexi pass. So what's the difference, and how should a visitor figure out which one suits the kind of trip they're going to be taking?
Yeah, I think it depends how long you've got and how long you want to stay in different places. If you're kind of like me and you just like a train ride, then and you're going to really use your pass, you're probably going to go to uh, South Wales. You're going to take the train up through the Central Wales line, end up back in Shrewsbury, depending how you want to talk it, and then head up to Chester and back down again, and you're going to spend a few hours in Liverpool, go across to Manchester and back. You're the person who will enjoy and get great value out of a consecutive pass. On the other hand, if you're wanting to take the train and go as far as, for example, the beautiful little village of the Kyle of Loch in the west of Scotland, and the train from uh, Inverness, and you're going to go to the Isle of Skye, well, when you get there, you're probably going to want to spend 2, 3, 4 days uh, there, hiking, walking, exploring, doing a little tour or whatever, before you come back and maybe divert and visit another city that you want to. And you're doing that over, say, 2 weeks, and you've decided you're going to travel for 4 days within those 2 weeks, then a Flexi pass is the one for you. So they're the two alternatives.
Yeah, so yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you're going to be on the train every day, get a consecutive pass. If you are only going to be on the train for specific days to get to point A to point B and then stay, then the flexi pass sounds ideal because then you have complete flexibility.
That's right. That's right.
So beyond the wide rail pass, there are a number of regional passes as well with a whole range of validities from a few days up to a month. Can you walk us through some of those, and how does a visitor figure out which combination kind of matches their travel plan? Should you just buy the Britain wide pass, or but if you're only going to the Southwest, can you get a Southwest
Yeah.
pass?
Yes, again, if you've got a broad idea of what you're going to do, the biggest alternative to the full BritRail pass is a thing called the BritRail England Pass, which, surprise, surprise, just covers England. So if you're not going to Wales and not going to Scotland, then you can save yourself a little bit of money and get a BritRail England Pass, and you can go on any train in England. And so that obviously covers as far north as Berwick-on-Tweed and Carlisle, and all the way down to the south coast and Cornwall, Devon, and so on and so forth. Regionally, the next bestseller is what we call the London Plus Pass, which is really London and the southeast. Quite an extensive trip pass. It includes places like Cambridge, like Oxford, like the wonderful historic naval dockyards in Portsmouth, going as far as Salisbury, maybe Devon, maybe Dover, Folkestone. You can see some of the uh, World War II, the White Cliffs of Dover and the museum and things there, or go around the corner, go to Deal, where I discovered not too long ago that Julius Caesar first set foot in Britain. Who knew that? And so that's that's London and the southeast, and it's meant for day trips or commuting in to and from London, whichever way you want. And you can do little circuits and things like that if you look at the map, because the services are so frequent. You can really have fun and see a lot using that relatively inexpensive pass. And of course, you don't want a car in London. Um, it is quite complicated, busy, congestion charges, ULEZ charges, and all the rest of the thing. So that is a great, great alternative. Then there is the Southwest and South Wales, which is just as the name implies, down to the southwest of Britain. If you're really just visiting that, that's good. And finally, Scotland. If you are exploring Scotland in depth, that's a good one to do. The trains are, because they are going around mountains and rivers and scenic, they don't go as fast. So you need quite a bit of time. And if you're going to spend a week or 10 days pottering around Scotland, that is by far the best option for you.
And so let's talk about the M Pass, which is the digital version of the pass that lives on your phone now. How does that work in practice? And there's no longer a paper ticket that you get.
Right. Yeah, there's no mystique to it. There's no mystery. It's the same product. You travel exactly the same. It's just that you have the product on your phone and you show it on the phone. You get a link and you validate it by different days when you elect to use it or to start your pass, and it's on your phone. Of course, it means that you can buy one immediately. You don't have to wait for it shipped, and there isn't a shipping cost. So, but it is, just emphasize, it is the same exact product.
Well, and make sure your phone is charged. And a lot of
And
trains
make
will
sure,
have
yes.
chargers now.
Yeah, well, the trains off, or nearly all nowadays have Wi-Fi, apart from on some of the really rural services, they have Wi-Fi and outlets and things. But of course, they're the three pin British ones or USB ports.
So, what does the pass not cover? So that way people clearly understand what, like, you can't use this on the tube.
Right. The big thing it does not cover is the tube, the Transport for London tube network. But as we say, it does cover the heavy rail through London, across London, Elizabeth Line, Thameslink. It does include the Airport Express, Gatwick trains as well. So that is the big things there. It does not include some of the heritage lines. There are some wonderful steam railways in Britain, which are, apart from being for train buffs, are really bits of history of Britain, and probably one of the best is the Severn Valley Railway. It doesn't cover that. You can get the train to it, but that's one of the others. And the great little trains of Wales, from the Festiniog Railway, things like that. Again, your BritRail pass can take you to Porthmadog to get onto the Festiniog line, but it doesn't cover that steam narrow gauge railway. Or similar with the other half dozen or so in and around in Wales. Great trip to do, by the way, if you can, is go to Wales, go on through Harlech and places, and then take the train up to Porthmadog and the steam train to Blaenau Festiniog, and end up getting back on the mainline railway up to Llandudno and back to Manchester. But I digress. Then it is simply some of the regional, very local light rail services, like the excellent tram network in Manchester, or the light rail network in Newcastle, for example. It does not cover. But other than that, all of the mainline trains are covered.
Well, I feel like I should add that if you are going to travel around London on the tube, that all you literally do now is tap your card and you pay the lowest fare. Like, it's not, you don't buy a ticket anymore. It's not complicated to travel on the tube, even if you have a BritRail pass. So you just tap your card and you're good.
That's right. Yes, that's right. And it maxes out for the day if you travel a lot.
Yeah. So it's a really clever system. So um, now, a common point of confusion is seat reservations. So how does that work? Because you don't reserving a seat on a train isn't mandatory. Sometimes you have to pay a little extra for it, depending on the train operating company. So, what does a pass holder do to reserve a seat, and how does it work alongside the pass?
Yeah. Um, as I say, you don't need a seat reservation on any train whatsoever. When asked, I would advise at certain times it's not a bad idea. If you're traveling in a group, maybe there's two or three or four of you, and you really want to sit together, then it's worth considering. Although, especially so, if you are going to be traveling at peak times, if you're wanting to travel out of uh, King's Cross, for example, to go to Edinburgh on the 10 o'clock, the traditional Flying Scotsman path, it's probably a good idea to reserve a seat, especially if you're wanting to do it on a Friday. Fridays and the weekends can be a bit busier. So that is the times to do it. And you can buy a pass. ACP will buy you a pass in advance, or if you want, you can go to the stations locally and get a pass, get a seat reservation, show your pass, and you can get a seat reservation there. And that you retain that flexibility. It does mean you're not rushing to get onto the train, and you know that you will have a seat there. And there are modest fees for buying them in advance. So as I say, horses for courses, sometimes it's really worth doing, but you don't need to do it all the time by any manner of means.
And it's just just thought of a question. Sorry, I forgot that I put this one on the list. But can you use the BritRail pass on the Caledonian Sleeper or the Cornish Riviera Sleeper trains?
Yeah, with a supplement.
Okay, so it's
Yeah,
just a little extra fee.
right.
Okay. So, what are some rookie mistakes you see visitors making when they use their passes for the first time, that are kind of completely avoidable if you have a little
Huh.
more knowledge?
Um, well, I mentioned the bags thing. I think getting the most out of it. You only need to do people get a little nervous, and you only need to do uh, two or three long journeys to make a BritRail pass really worth it. So don't underuse it, I would say. Venture out. You've got such a frequent, even on the main lines, even from London to Manchester, you've got a train every 20 minutes to half an hour. So you've really got the opportunity to use it. And if you're in London or you're in Bath or something other, and you've got the afternoon free, you can get on the train and you could go to Salisbury and back and see the magnificent town of Salisbury. So make sure that you use it and plan it when you're there. You can't go wrong.
So let's get tactical about planning a trip. What's the best way to actually plan a rail-based itinerary around Britain? How do you balance big set piece cities with the smaller places that are a joy to reach by train?
Yeah, I think it starts off with when you're planning a trip. How long have you got? Do you have any specific interests? Does that involve maybe sport, maybe football? Are you interested in some of the wartime history, some of the specific museums? And then if you've got a theme of some of these and that you want to see, and there are some absolutely wonderful museums and sites and venues across Britain. So I think that's the starting point. What is it that you want to do, or whoever you're traveling with? What do you want to see and do? I would also advise, if you can, picking a base and staying there for 2 or 3 days or longer if you can, and exploring, and then taking a few trips out from there. And in these days of Airbnb, that's a little easier than perhaps it used to be. And as I say, the trains are central, so the more central you can be in your accommodations, that is also very, very useful. So yeah, those are some of the things that I think, looking back, you can do a little bit more and get even more value of it. And there's so many themes. I always think when you're visiting Britain that you can take up that may interest you and that you want to do. And we could talk about some of the different ones, but absolutely, that's the starting point.
Yeah, and I would say, like, if you want to see stately homes, but there's usually a taxi rank at every train station,
Yeah,
and it's
and
yeah, or do
your Uber works as well. Fine, yeah, and there's sometimes it's a little bit more complicated to work, but it works. Is there are great local bus networks, and if you can't work it out, just ask somebody, and 90% of people will happily try and help you.
yeah, and most areas have a tourist information office, even these days, and they have people who are happy to help and
To
direct you
help.
wherever you want to go. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed.
So, apps, timetables, real time information. What tools should a visitor have on their phone to kind of help them navigate the rail network?
Yeah, the nationalrail.co.uk website is one that I certainly use when I'm traveling around. It is the most up to date, and it's worth noting that the rail network runs pretty well. They do maintenance and engineering, and we have a tradition of doing it on Saturday nights and Sundays. Doesn't mean that everything is affected by any manner of means. In fact, the opposite. Very small amounts are affected, but it's worth checking if there's a diversion or a delay, or sometimes, heaven forbid, a coach replacement service. It does happen,
Yeah.
particularly on Sundays. So that is the one that has the National Rail website is the one that has the current state and to plan ahead. And if by any chance there's been some disruption, that is the one for check-in, and that's your roadmap that's your Google Maps or Waze of the railway.
Yeah, they love to do maintenance on weekends, bank
Yeah,
holidays, the Christmas break. So those can be a challenge, or you'll end up on a coach, which is
yeah, that's always the thing.
it's not not nearly as good as a train, but you'll still get there.
You still get there. Yeah, some of us who've been around a little bit get a little frustrated because we used to divert and all the rest of it. Heaven forbid you put somebody on a bus, and happens a little too quickly now. But don't get me started on
So, uh, so for listeners who may not be sold on a BritRail pass, where do they buy one? What advice would you give them before they book?
Well, you can buy one at acprail.com, and you can look at all of the various options that there are of the regional ones that we've talked about, and decide which is the one that fits your amount of time available, or your interests of what you want to see and how you want to explore, or who you're going to see as well. So that is the place to start, and there's a lot of information there as well.
Yeah, and there's a great map on the BritRail website that has all the main routes, which is handy to look at, and I'll link to that in the show notes so people can get an idea of where they can go, because a lot of people don't realize. I mean, we don't have many trains here in the U.S., so we don't think about trains. But in Britain, you can get everywhere on trains, and it won't take you 24 hours to go somewhere on a train.
And and the big difference is the frequency. That's the
Yeah.
thing that surprises people, is that there's a train every 2 or 3 an hour to Leeds and Manchester and Liverpool. Even cross country, you can get a train easily from Manchester to Birmingham on a very regular basis, and all of that. That's what really surprises people, is the sheer frequency of service.
Yeah, I'm going to Newcastle at the end of August, to walk Hadrian's Wall, and
Aha.
when I was booking my ticket on the East Coast Main Line, I was because I'm literally going right from the airport to train station, and I was like, there's literally like 3 or 4 trains an
Yeah,
hour to Newcastle, and it only takes two hours
two
or
and a
so,
half
or like
hours.
3 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not doesn't take long at all, and I'm like, I'm going to be in Newcastle before I even had lunch. It's going to be
that's
great.
right. Absolutely. That's the joy. And you'll have been through some wonderful countryside, especially as you get north of York.
Oh, I can't wait. So, well, let's close on let's tell me your favorite railway route in Britain that you should tell everybody to take. And I think you kind of already answered it, but this will be for the social media clip anyway. So let's give us your favorite
Oh,
rail journey.
oh my goodness, I've got lots, but I would say, let me say, going north out of Edinburgh or Glasgow, Stirling, heading up towards Inverness. You're going through places like Pitlochry and Aviemore, and you really begin to feel as though you are going through the Highlands, of course, but you're getting to the more adventurous parts of any trip, and the scenery at any point is spectacular. And so I have to say that is the ones. And you look out of the castle at Stirling and the rivers and the streams and the lochs, and then when you get to look forward to getting to Inverness, you've then got three lines. You can either go west to the Carlock, north to the far north line, or east to Aberdeen, and you could head back to London. So I always feel as though when I do that, I'm beginning to go on an adventure.
That and that's if anybody takes away anything from this episode is that the railway is your key to unlimited adventures because you don't need a car and you don't need to travel by road. You can get there by train.
Right. Indeed.
So, Tim, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful, useful, practical conversation. I think a lot of our listeners are going to feel far more confident about taking the train in Britain after this. And so, thank you so much for joining the Angletopia podcast. We will put links to everything we discussed, including the BritRail Pass, in the show notes. And thanks again to today's sponsor, ACP Rail and BritRail. If this episode has you dreaming of seeing Britain by train, a BritRail Pass is the easiest way to make it happen. Unlimited travel across England, Scotland, and Wales right on your phone. Head to acprail.com to learn more and buy your pass, and the link is in the show notes. And don't forget about our giveaway. We are partnering with them to give away a first class BritRail 4-day Flexi Pass, which gives you 4 flexible days of premium travel across Britain. So you can literally go to Britain for a couple weeks, plan your railway travel days, and get everywhere you want to go. So to enter, just go to angletopia.net/BritRail, and you'll also find that link in the show notes. Good luck. That contest ends, I believe, August 15th. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, or comment, and tell us where you'd like to go on your British Rail adventure over on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook. And if you love the Angletopia podcast, please consider joining the Friends of Angletopia Club, where you can get early access to new episodes and connect with other Britain enthusiasts. So join us next time as we continue exploring the people, places, and stories that make Britain so endlessly fascinating to discover. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.